Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to testify before your committee and Ranking Member Pence as well. The number of things on infrastructure that came to mind when I saw the announcement that came out on I think a handshake on approaching this infrastructure in a more aggressive way than we have in the past. And things I wanted to point out to the committee. 16 years ago, I signed on to support the Lewis and Clark Rural Water System, and that addresses some 20 communities in South Dakota, Minnesota, and Iowa. We've always fallen short on the funding for that, and so we've limped along. But what has happened is the local government's commitment have all been paid up front. They paid it all up front, and it's the federal government that's dragging along here trying to catch up. So I wanted to emphasize how important it is to complete and finish Lewis and Clark Rural Water. It's, and then the next piece that I wanted to address was the locks and dams, and I represent the Missouri side of Iowa, but the Missouri River side of Iowa, but the locks and dams on the Mississippi River have fallen into disrepair. We've had high waters that make it even worse, and I would note to the committee that we built those locks and dams back during the Great Depression when America was limping along with a terrible economy. And now we're in a place where we have a 3% plus GDP growth, and we need to restore the locks and dams, and we need to expand them for the size of river traffic that we do have. And it's very energy efficient going up and down the river, and it's environmentally friendly to do that. So I focus on the locks and dams and make another point also that in 2011, we had more water come down the Missouri River than ever before. The PICS loan program, which built 6 dams in the upper Missouri River that to protect us from flooding as the primary purpose of it, was designed to accommodate the largest runoff ever. When they designed it, it was 1888 and that the largest runoff came down. Now it's 2011, and we saw more water below those dams this spring than ever before. And I have great sympathy for my neighbors across to the west, Nebraska, who probably took the hit 3 or 4 times worse than we did in Iowa. And of course, it was bad enough in Iowa. So that's some resources that we will know how to put them to work. And also, we've got 41 breaches in our levees along that stretch, just on the Iowa side of the Missouri River that were created this spring. And then I want to mention the utilities that we're focused on roads and bridges and transportation with the announcement as I just quickly reviewed it, Mr. Chairman. And there's another component of this, and that's the utility side, the water, the wastewater, stormwater, that entire infrastructure that's necessary to keep our towns and cities up and functioning. And if it's going to be only a transportation approach to this, then we're going to have trouble addressing the utilities side of it, the infrastructure on the utilities. But here's the real point that I have not raised before this committee, or raised, I don't think, as effectively as I should have been in the time I've been in this Congress. So I'm going to take you back to some numbers from about 2003 or so when Mr. Don Young was the chairman of the Transportation Committee. And I put it together that a pie chart of what happened with our road use, we call it road use tax dollar, or user fee is a happier term to use, and I support that. But when people put the nozzle in the tank, they expect to be paying that for roads and bridges, which is the focus of this infrastructure discussion. And so I broke that dollar down for each dollar coming in. Old numbers, I admit, they probably haven't changed that much. There was, according to the committee then, as much as 28% of that dollar was going to pay for environmental and archaeological. That sounds pretty high to me, but that was a number that I recall from back then. 17% went to mass transit, 3% went to trails. You know that I've been one who has worked diligently to repeal Davis-Bacon. That might be our disagreement point, Mr. Chairman, but that's about 20% by our numbers. Now this pie chart, when you look at it in your mind's eye, leaves only 1/3 of each dollar that goes actually to roads and bridges. And we're paying for the balance of this out of the general fund and going into debt. So I would suggest that we get the maximum amount of dollars out of that road use fund, however we negotiate that, however we define it, and bring this down to where if we have to go outside that fund for other things, let's go out of the general fund for the pieces that are not roads and bridges rather than keeping it all together, because the public wants to pay for the user fee for roads and bridges with their gas tax. I'd ask, let's change that formula. I see my clock has run out. I appreciate your attention, and I'd yield back the imbalance of my time.
I thank the gentleman for his testimony. I think you'll be pleased to hear that during the discussion with President Trump yesterday that water, clean water, wastewater, and the inland waterways were all subject to the discussion. There was no significant discussion on how this is going to be paid for. I expect for transportation, we'll be looking at some combination of bonding and user fees. Some of the other areas I'm not so certain, but we are going to have a subsequent meeting to have those discussions and hopefully can come to some agreement. This should be a paid-for package as we move forward. So appreciate your concern and want you to know that those things were raised. So, and you're not the first person today to talk about the inland waterways, which are kind of an afterthought a lot of the time, and they shouldn't be because of the critical nature of their contribution to commerce. Do any members of the committee have questions? Okay, with that, I thank the gentleman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.